Now, for a moment of science. I have a volunteer. Would you like to volunteer, sir?
Yes, sir. Never met before.
Now, one of the problems with this guy, I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed, get your tool.
Yeah.
Started? Okay, got it. Over it, open it. Oh, it's like that. Now, what I'd like you to do is stare at that while I talk, because you're going to see an optic illusion. But one thing I've noticed about he's in 8th grade now, and I don't know if you've noticed it, you kind of think he's a big shot. And over time, his head has slowly grown, and it's kind of frightening. He can't wear a hat anymore because his head is getting. Now, what's happening? Take it down. Can't wear a hat anymore. Okay. There's a Tom Bentley's not here today. Wow. This is kind of an interesting experiment. About a year ago, on the line it said some physicist had discovered how a siphon works in the encyclopedia and dictionaries is just wrong. And I'm going to kind of demonstrate that today. But a siphon's pretty important. How does a toilet work? It's the siphon. It doesn't always work, right? So we can kind of see why if it doesn't go up and down and get it started, it just doesn't work right. So I didn't bring any water, but let's pretend this is water inside a tube. It's less messy that way. And what happens if you have more water pulling on the outside than the inside? Huh? No.
Turn the chair around.
That's okay.
That's a visual aid. You don't need.
What happens is right now there's pull this way and there's pull this way. And there's a little bit of friction up here at the top. But when there's more pulling on the outside than the inside our water tube, away it's going to go. Now in the encyclopedia, if you go to an old encyclopedia, I haven't checked Wikipedia lately, but it says it's air pressure, more air pressure pushing on this side than this side, or I don't know what it is, but it's wrong. Because what I'm about to show you would work on the moon, and there is no air in the moon. So here, let's flush our toilet, and you get the water coming up, you get it down, and once it's pulling harder on the outside, this is also a very good thing to do if you have a bunch of Mardi Gras beads you don't know what to do.
That's cool.
Now I'm going to get to, my title of my talk is 25 Years of UU Support to the Hands-On Science Center. As I started looking back, UU members, without them, this wouldn't have happened. The key members were, number one was Don Mayle was a contributor, and I don't know, Don Mayle's picture is right there. Don Mayle was an astronomer, and one of the things he did, which I kind of liked and copied, he got a big black umbrella, but I didn't want to do that. I'll pretend this is his big black umbrella. And this is, what's that? Anybody know what that is?
Big Dipper.
Big Dipper, and then what's this thing?
North Star.
So these two on the lip of the dipper, see the cup of the dipper, point towards the North Star. So he was a great way to show all the stars in the sky. These are the most important. These are probably why people are in the northern hemisphere, not in the southern hemisphere. Because when you're out in the middle of the ocean, you can look up and see as the Earth spins, because the North Pole is pointed right at the North Star. So they held that up in the north, and whenever you go outside, that star doesn't move, but the Earth spinning out from under it does this. So if you're out in the middle of the ocean, you can tell where the north is. There is no south star, so you're out in the, in the middle of the night. I don't know how you know which way you're going. might use a compass, it probably doesn't work very good. So there is, which I think is a pretty good explanation of how that works. So I was thanks to Don Mayo. When I was in grade school, I was a pretty poor student. Actually, it was so bad that when I was in second grade, I was such a dunce that Mrs. Williams exchanged me for my kindergarten sister, had her come up and take my place and set me in a kindergarten. Like that was going to shake me up and say, okay, I'll start learning. Well, it didn't bother me too much, but it sure bothered my sister and my parents. It might even be good for a lawsuit. I was probably a little late for that. Then I had Mrs. Williams for the next 2 years. So I had 3 years with Mrs. Williams. Then about 5th grade, my cousin in his 20s took me aside and started pointing out stuff in space and infinity and explained the difference between an AM and FM radio and many other things. And all of a sudden I realized these science books, I looked at them just like I did spelling and English and geography. It just didn't make sense and it was boring. But then all of a sudden I saw another side of science. So this pretty well changed my life. And I've been conscious of that because every time I see a kid I realize that could be me and maybe they need the spark. So finally I moved on to UTSI, and at UTSI we had many school groups visit. And a school group, what are you going to do at UTSI? Well, we'd show them the big computer, which was pretty darn boring. And then we'd show them the technical library, which is even more boring. And then they'd say, okay, you guys want to come here? Well, probably not. Don't ever do that. And so I started giving liquid nitrogen demonstrations and started growing, and pretty soon we had an outreach thing where we were doing just many different schools. And at one time we started calling ourselves the Visiting Wizards. The 3M had a similar program and they gave us permission to use their logo and the name, and we had as many as 100 visiting wizards, including Don Mayo, Brooke Fox, Tom Bentley, and one day, about 1989, Dr. Vakili met me in the cafeteria line and said, hey, we need to talk. And so we talked, and he said he was in AIAA, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And they challenged, are you in that, Peter?
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew about this when it happened, but they challenged all the chapters to come up with something that could be copied throughout the country. And they said, why don't we start a science center? And so they started, and we had a few meetings, and they said, okay, we'll do it. In 1990, 25 years ago, probably close to today, we got a charter, nonprofit, hands-on science center, with not much more than that. I had, by this time, accumulated a bunch of demonstration materials that were starting to overflow our house. And they said, well, why don't we build a building for him to store that stuff in? And they said, well, while we're building the building, why don't we make a science center with exhibits and stuff? So there we went. I'm going to give a similar talk here in a couple of weeks to Noon Rotary, because two guys in Noon Rotary, and plus a bunch of them, also took the ball and started running. Jim Devlin, who owned about 7 McDonald's, and Joe Lester, who has the insurance company and owns probably half of Tullahoma also. He's a part of the Harton family. They took it upon themselves to raise money. Jim Devlin did it because he thought he could sell more hamburgers, and he asked Joe, he says, why are you doing this? He says, because it's the right thing to do. And then Rotary, service before self, is the motto, and Jim said, yeah, that's why I'm doing it, not because of the hamburgers. So between them, they were able to raise the money to get us started. They raised up eventually $500,000. They hit every business in Tullahoma and Manchester. They also asked for $300 for a lifetime membership to donate to what was basically nothing. Peter Sully's was one. Casey Reddy was another. I was not. I didn't think we could pull this off. So being on the stingy side, and I'd like to be able to say, well, I told you so, I did not. But eventually I have made up for it. We kept plugging away. John Fox and I and a couple others, Ahmad Vakili, Dr. Vakili, were the charter members. And we had several meetings. I remember one meeting at UTSI, only Dr. Vakili, myself, and John showed up. And John said, well, okay, we tried. I'm ready to throw in the towel. Ahmad and I said, we aren't. So we kept going. John became very involved. How many of you have never been there? Never been to the Science Center? Our most popular thing is created by John was the Race with the Animals. Here's an early brochure, which I had nothing to do with this, but this just happens to be my granddaughter, who is now a nurse at Erlanger, and my grandsons. One of them is a majored in biology, master's degree. He works at Vanderbilt as an instrument technician. There's the nurse again, and she's in quality control at Jack Daniels. I had nothing to do with this. They surprised me with it, but this was an early brochure, so just to see. And the Race with the Animals was created by John, and that's our most popular thing. And we've had people drive down from Murfreesboro just to do that. So now we're up to over 100 exhibits. Tom Bentley made one of the first exhibits, and I'm surprised he's not here, or maybe he lost interest or something, but as I go through the minutes, I concentrated for 5 years. We opened our doors about 20 years ago today. We're going to celebrate at the Science Center here later in the month. And the agony we went through for those 5 years, and Tom Bentley was president for 1 year, and looking through the minutes, and I attended some of those meetings, there'd be 2 meetings a week. They'd last a couple hours. There'd be 25 guys in there arguing, guys and maybe 1 or 2 women, arguing about what are we doing, where are we going to go, why are we doing this, and where are we going to get the money. And they just kept plugging away. This is Tom Bentley, after we finally got started signing an alliance with the commander at ADC. And I talked to him and I said, it's sure been easy to give up. And he said, when I start something, I never finish. So Tom was an active visiting wizard back then and created one of the first exhibits. John Fox actually created the first one, but it got lost and destroyed, so it's not out there. And so it was pretty tumultuous. So by the time we opened, it's still tough going. Where are we going to go? We tried Small World, is that the name of the store? The Davis House, which has since been torn down. The post office building, well, that looked pretty good for a while. And then finally we homed in South Jackson. We got all that space there. We had a big sign out front. This is the future home of South Jackson. A lot of people weren't very happy about it. And finally, at the last minute, Goodrich, landing gear division of Goodrich, came up with 3.5 acres right next to them. I don't know how many of you know that, but where the Science Center is, right next to us, our neighbor makes the landing gear for all the world's biggest airplanes and most of the Air Force landing gear. And so that was a big deal. And then Tennessee Elk River Development Association was about to go out of business, and they had about $50,000, and they donated to us, but also held our feet to the fire. You know, we had to meet certain construction deadlines, and it was a very good thing. So that $50,000, then all of a sudden the $500,000 that these gentlemen raised from all the businesses, the only businesses that turned them away were ones about to go bankrupt, and they didn't take no for an answer. So now we've been open 20 years. Casey Reddy, as you know, as a fundraiser, is just scary. We'd go into Jacobs, and he'd sit down with the president of Jacobs and ask him for $15,000, and he said, well, we did it last year. How much more are we going to do this? And I was about ready to crawl under a table, and KC just wouldn't take no for an answer, so he just kept giving us money. He was instrumental. Let's see some of the others that played a part. Mary Motlow was also a very enthusiastic supporter. Going back to Peter Sollers, after he did that, the I-beams underneath the drive-through became very, I hate to say it, they're getting bad again, they became very rusty and just awful. He took 2 weeks of vacation, got scaffolding out there, and scraped the rust off, treated the metal with this horrible smelling stuff, and then painted it for 2 weeks. It was just awful. And that was a big contribution. Lena Reddy donated $1,000 just to keep start the Lego League there to sponsor a team. Elaine Basanka used the Science Center frequently to help with her Cub Scout activities. Brooke Fox was on our committees, and he was also a visiting wizard, and he, I don't know, probably none of you remember, but he had billboards. We had a girl with her hair standing out on the Van de Graaff generator, and so that became on billboards throughout the town for a while. Mary Fox, I don't know how many of you know her, but she's been, she lived in California, I think. Is she in Nashville? Well, she moved, but yearly she'd send a check from herself as well as a matching check from Tyco, which accumulated a lot of money. Barbara Craig was instrumental in, just before she left, we got about a $15,000 grant to support at-risk kids to come to the Science Center for demonstrations as well as free time with all the 100 exhibits we have. These were at-risk kids, which most of them are now, and all the schools in Tullahoma are now Title I schools, which means free lunch because so many of them can't afford lunch. So when they come, we either give them a liquid nitrogen show, which is the most popular, or they can have electricity and magnetism, lasers and light, sound, miscellaneous, and space. So we've got quite a variety of things they can do. Nathan Payne at Nissan, he's been helping, and he was intrigued by the fact the only difference between a motor and a generator, basically, if you turn the motor, it becomes a generator. If you add electricity to a generator, it becomes a motor. And that's how my Prius works and the Nissan Leaf works. Basically, electricity depends which way it's going. He has gotten them to make, Nissan's making an exhibit, which we don't have yet. But this will demonstrate exactly. The kids can do that, turn the motor and make the generator go, or turn the generator and make the motor go. And they said, well, can you bring it today, maybe? He said, well, it weighs 300 pounds, so probably not. So, well, we don't have it yet. I guess it's just a matter, he said he turned it over to somebody else and he sort of lost control, so I guess eventually we'll get it. Leah Terry helped me organize 100 pictures of our exhibits, which I was having trouble figuring out how to do. Andrew Northcutt worked there for a couple of years. Patsy Moore, John's wife, frequently had me come and do visiting wizard demonstrations for her kindergarten class, and then she would bring them to the Science Center. And of course, Lucy Boss has maintained the scrapbook for 25 years. You know, it's so much now, I don't know who's ever going to look at it because we got this many volumes of all the newspaper clippings and things, but it never fails. They're there. Finally, Dr. Versa, who said, and I verified this quote while I was at the pool there, the only real in a sense, the only real church in town is the Hands-On Science Center. So I don't know, what are we doing here? About 15 years ago, R.J. Hayes took over as general manager. I don't know if you know R.J. or Sandy Hayes, but we were in trouble. The general manager did a major cleaning up, and the treasury was about zero, and then she had a heart attack. So we were in trouble. R.J. Hayes came along and said, I'm the only guy in the country who can fix that. And he came in and bulldozed over a lot of people, and I realized he was the real deal. And he not only got us back on our feet, and then he over doubled the size, so we're over 11,000 square feet now. He added a theater, 2 birthday party rooms, a gift shop, and storage rooms, and did the work himself with prisoners and donations and had it paid for. I'm pretty sure if you check the minutes, we never approved him doing that. You know? But he was hard to stop. Over the last 3 years, we're running about 18,000 visitors, 70 a year. About 70% are children. And collectively, between the Visiting Wizard demonstrations and our visitors, we're well over 300,000 contacts. For instance, they had me come to Woodbury for a show. After I got there, I discovered I'm doing the whole school, K through 12.
Oh, wow.
And there were 450 kids in the gymnasium at the same time. That's a challenge. We host about 150, as many as 120 field trips per year. And these come from 11 surrounding counties. I guess one big compliment we have, you know where Savannah, Tennessee is? It's closer to Memphis than us. They came twice. Can you imagine that bus ride? But that was nice, they came twice. They haven't come 3 times, but that was pretty amazing. For older kids, I try to give a pitch, depending on how I feel. I say, how many of you know someone who hates their job or can't get a job? Wouldn't it be nice to get a job that's fun, interesting, pays well, and may make the world a better place? It's not for everybody, but it just might be for you. So I don't have any smoking guns of anybody that's getting a Nobel Prize or anything from, but I don't think we're doing any harm. I just learned that the observatory came from UTSI that we have out front there. The trees were overgrowing it out there, and they donated to us, and we had an Eagle Scout coordinated the movement and construction that went along with the observatory. Well, you're familiar with the New Horizon trip to Pluto. Mm-hmm. He's involved in that now. So a lot happens in 25 years. In addition to the things I've mentioned, we have a great place for adult skills group, and we've had 500 visitors from them. They come in a bus and they just sit, and some of them just love to keep doing the same exhibit over and over again, but they seem to really love coming there. We host at little or no cost Foster Family Association families, Boy Scouts, Pinewood Derby. The AEDC has a yearly engineering competition for high school students, and we host that once a year. And then just and particularly yesterday, hopefully we get more into this, we hosted Code Camp, computer programming, now called Code, and it's been other organizations have actually sponsored this, but they had 25 kids, and then if I read the thing, I don't know if she made a mistake, but she said we had 100 girls there yesterday learning how to code. Rosie Graham was their instructor who teaches at Motlow. So this is an area hopefully we get into further. So we have a lot of day camps, we have workshops, And we're always trying to think of other things that can, since we started, the word STEM has become a buzzword, you know, just in the last few years. So now we are a STEM center. Science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM. And so we're trying to capitalize on it. Since we got started at AEDC, they didn't seem to, other than that alliance that we had, they didn't seem to get involved with this. Now the Air Force is starting to realize they want engineers with security clearances. They can't get them. You know, there's a lot of foreigners that have these degrees, but so now they're very, very concerned. So they actually hired a guy that used to be one of our visiting wizards, Jerry Mattering. Now he's on our board, but he's a professional out there getting paid for STEM programs at AEDC. And now, I don't know if you know this or not, Carol Thomas at UTSI used to be on our board. UTSI now has a STEM program for kids. So our future is tied up in technology, for better or worse, but there we are. Do we have any questions? Well, let's see. We're going to have a talk back, and then I'm going to give our closing words. As we leave this friendly place, love gives life to every face. May the lessons which we learn light our lives till we return. Thank you.